You know, usually when you walk over to the kitchen sink and turn on the tap, there's this expectation of immediate gratification.
Right, yeah. You turn the handle, the water flows.
Exactly. You don't stand there thinking about the Roman aqueducts that, pioneered water transport, or the local reservoir, or the massive underground network of high-pressure pipes. You just want a glass of water.
It's pure utility. I mean, the infrastructure is entirely invisible to you.
It's completely transparent, and while there's a comfort in that reliability, right? We like things to just work.
Oh, totally. You don't want to need a master's degree in civil engineering just to brew a pot of coffee in the morning.
Yeah, exactly. But when you step into the world of digital communication, specifically the internet, suddenly that invisible plumbing becomes like the most complex, staggering engineering achievement in human history.
It really is. It's wildly intricate.
We're relying on this technological landscape that is vast and honestly largely misunderstood by the very people who stare at it every single second of the day.
It is the absolute definition of taking a modern miracle completely for granted. I mean, you tap a piece of glass in your hand and a video plays. But the journey of that data is almost incomprehensible.
Which is exactly why we're tracing those invisible threads today. Welcome to our deep dive.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to get into this.
Yeah, we're going to unearth the hidden architecture of the digital world. We'll be moving from Cold War military research laboratories and the sheer paranoia of the nuclear age to a particle physics lab in Switzerland.
And all the way through the decades to that glowing rectangle sitting in your pocket right now.
Exactly. And our source material today is just incredible. It gives us this comprehensive look at the sheer scale of the collaboration required to begin this thing.
Yeah, across generations, across competing nations, across totally different technical philosophies, it's breathtaking, honestly. It's a story about human problem solving on a global scale.
Because, let's face it, the internet has completely rewritten the rules of humanity. It's transformed how we work, how we buy our groceries.
How we fall in love, how we argue with strangers.
Right, how we learn. Yet, if you stop someone on the street and ask them how it actually works, or, who built it, you'll probably just get a blank stare.
Yeah, a total blank stare.
So, today's mission for this deep dive is to extract the mechanics and the history of this global nervous system.
And to do that, we really have to rewind the clock to understand the foundation. We have to go back to the 1960s.
Okay, the 1960s.
Yeah, which requires completely resetting our modern expectations of what a computer even is.
Right, because today, to you listening, a computer is probably something thinner than a notepad that you just toss into a backpack.
Or it's the phone in your hand. But in the 1960s, a computer was the size of a two-car garage.
Wait, a two-car garage?
Oh, yeah. A very loud, very hot two-car garage. They were massive mainframes.
Wow.
They generated so much heat, they required dedicated cooling systems, and they were wildly expensive. We're talking millions of dollars.
Just for one machine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And because of that cost, the standard operating procedure was something called batch processing.
I'm not familiar with that term, batch processing.
Yeah, so imagine you're a scientist who wants to run a complex calculation. You couldn't just sit at a keyboard and type it in.
Like we do now.
Right. You had to write your program out, often by punching physical holes into a stack of cardboard cards.
Wait, physical holes in cardboard?
Literally. You would hand this physical stack of cards to a computer operator, usually wearing a white shirt and tie.
Okay, so a very formal process.
Very. And that operator would take your cards, put them in a queue, a literal batch of jobs from other scientists, and feed them into the machine one by one.
So you couldn't just get an instant answer?
Not at all. You might wait 24 hours to get your results back, printed on a massive stack of paper.
And I imagine if you made one typo, like one hole punched in the wrong spot, the program crashes.
Oh, absolutely. It crashes, and you have to wait another 24 hours to try again.
That sounds incredibly frustrating.
It was a massive bottleneck for innovation. I mean, you had these million-dollar machines sitting idle while operators just shuffled cards around.
Right, because the human element was the slowest part.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Computer scientists realized they couldn't just let one person or one batch of cards monopolize the machine's processing power.
So they needed a fix.
Yeah. So they began developing a completely new software architecture called time sharing.
Okay, let me see if I can visualize this. If batch processing is like ordering a custom suit and waiting weeks for it, time sharing is. Well, maybe it's more like a chef in a really busy restaurant kitchen.
Let's follow that. How so?
So the chef is the mainframe computer. and the chef is cooking 4 dishes at once. They stir soup for 2 seconds, chop some vegetables for another dish for 2 seconds, flip a steak for a third dish, and, plate a salad for the fourth.
Right, jumping between tasks.
Yeah, they're moving so fast between the tasks that to the 4 different customers sitting in the dining room, it feels like their meal is being prepared exclusively for them.
Oh, I like that.
But in reality, the chef is time-sharing their attention in fractions of a second.
That is a brilliant analogy. The computer rapidly switches its processing power between multiple users sitting at different terminals.
So everyone feels like they have their own computer.
Exactly. It calculates a tiny bit of one person's code, then moves to the next, looping around so fast that it creates the illusion that each person has the entire mainframe all to themselves.
It maximizes the efficiency of the machine. The chef never stops moving.
And this concept, sharing computing resources efficiently, is basically the foundational DNA of the internet.
Okay, that makes sense.
But there is a massive leap from sharing one computer in one room to sharing resources across an entire continent.
Right, which is the actual internet part.
Yeah. And to make that leap, we have to talk about a man named J.C.R. Licklider.
J.C.R. Licklider. He was working at the Advanced Research Projects Agency, right? Known as ARPA, which falls under the U.S. Department of Defense.
Correct. He was leading their Information Processing Techniques office, and Licklider had this radical, almost prophetic idea that he called the Intergalactic Computer Network.
The Intergalactic Computer Network. That's an amazing name.
It was his playful term for a universal network. He envisioned a globally interconnected set of computers where anyone could sit down at a terminal and quickly access data, programs, and files from any other computer on the network.
Regardless of where it was physically located.
Exactly.
Which is quite literally what you and I and everyone listening do every single day when we open a web browser. But in the 1960s, suggesting that must have sounded like absolute science fiction.
It bordered on the absurd, honestly, given the technology of the day. The primary hurdle was the physical connection.
Because they're the size of garages.
Right. How do you link these massive room-sized mainframes together? The only existing wide-scale communication infrastructure in the 1960s was the global telephone network.
Which was designed for human voices, not computer data.
Exactly. And the telephone network operated on a principle called circuit switching.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because I know that understanding why circuit switching failed is the key to understanding why the internet was actually born.
It really is.
Circuit switching is basically the old school telephone operator model, isn't it? Like those old black and white movies where someone says, operator, connect me to Poughkeepsie.
Oh, that's the exact mechanism, yeah.
Yep.
If you wanted to call a computer in another state, a physical, continuous electrical circuit had to be opened.
Like a physical wire.
Yeah, the telephone company's mechanical switches would physically clack into place, establishing an unbroken copper wire connection between your location and the destination.
And that dedicated circuit had to be maintained for the entire duration of the connection.
For the entire duration.
So while I'm connected to you, no one else in the world can use that specific copper wire. It is dedicated entirely to us.
Precisely. Now, for a voice conversation, that's highly reliable. You don't want your phone call dropping in.
Right, you want a clear line.
But computers don't talk like humans do. Humans produce a continuous stream of noise. Computers, they talk in bursts.
Bursts? What do you mean?
A computer will send a massive chunk of data in a millisecond, then sit completely silent for 10 minutes while it processes a response, and then send another chunk.
Ah, I see. If you use a dedicated telephone circuit for a computer, you're tying up that expensive copper line, but it's sitting idle and wasted 99% of the time.
It's wildly inefficient. But there was an even bigger problem, and it goes back to why the Department of Defense was funding this.
Right, we're in the Cold War here.
Exactly. From a military perspective, during the height of the Cold War, a single dedicated telephone line is a massive, glaring vulnerability.
Because if an enemy strike takes out a central telephone switchboard in, say, Chicago, every single dedicated circuit running through that building is instantly severed.
Yep. The entire communication network goes dark.
Wow.
The rigidity of circuit switching is actually what sparked the internet. The military needed a communication system that could survive a nuclear strike.
So they had to invent something totally new.
Yeah. Research into a completely new decentralized way of transmitting data began simultaneously with Paul Barron at the RAND Corporation in the U.S. and independently by a scientist named Donald Davies at the UK's National Physical Laboratory around 1965.
And what they came up with was a concept called packet switching.
Yes. And what's fascinating here is how violently packet switching rejected the existing paradigm.
How so?
Well, before this, communication was a dedicated, unbroken line. Packet switching threw that concept entirely out the window.
Okay.
Instead of sending a message as one continuous stream over a dedicated path, the message is chopped up into tiny, uniform chunks. These are the packets.
I'm struggling to wrap my head around this. Let me try another analogy. Tell me if I'm off base here.
Go for it.
Let's say I want to send an entire car from New York to Los Angeles. Under the old telephone circuit switching model, I have to, build a dedicated private railway track from New York to LA, put the car on a single train, and guard that track the whole way.
Right, and nobody else can use my track.
Yeah. It would cost a fortune, and if a bridge washes out in Kansas, your car never makes it to LA. The connection is broken.
Exactly, it's very fragile.
Right. So under the packet switching model, wait, this sounds insane. Under packet switching, instead of putting the car on a train, I take the car completely apart in New York.
Yes, you chop the data into packets.
So I, mail the steering wheel via FedEx, I send the tires via UPS, I ship the engine via the U.S. Postal Service, and I throw the doors onto a random Greyhound bus.
You're throwing all these different pieces into the chaotic public transportation network.
Yeah. And they all take completely different routes across the country based on whatever highway has the least traffic at that exact millisecond. One piece goes through Dallas, another through Seattle.
That's the routing part.
And then when they all finally arrive in Los Angeles at different times, they magically rebuild themselves in my driveway into a functioning car.
It sounds like absolute chaos, I know, but it is brilliantly resilient chaos.
Yeah.
And yes, your analogy is spot on.
It just feels so counterintuitive.
Well, think about it this way. Each of those car parts, the digital packets, has a label attached to it, a header.
Okay, a header.
That header contains metadata that says, I am packet number 45 out of 100, and my final destination is this specific address in Los Angeles.
So the network, the highways, and the trucks, in my analogy, doesn't need to understand what the whole message is.
Exactly.
A router in the middle of the country doesn't know it's passing a piece of an email or a piece of a photograph. It just looks at the label and says, oh, you're going to LA. The fastest way right now is through Denver. Go.
Yes. And this completely solves Paul Barron's requirement for network survivability for the military.
Because if Denver goes down.
Right. If you're sending your dismantled car and a nuclear strike takes out a communication hub in Chicago, the packets don't just stop and give up like the circuit switch phone line would.
Because the network is decentralized.
Exactly. The routers simply look at the traffic, realize Chicago is down, and instantly say, okay, reroute this steering wheel down through St. Louis instead.
The packets just flow around the damage, like water flowing around a rock in a stream.
That's a perfect way to put it.
Right.
The reliability of the network becomes greater than the reliability of its individual parts.
Because there's no single point of failure.
Right. If a node goes down, the network just routes around it.
But I'm stuck on the driveway part of the analogy. When all these packets arrive in LA, they're going to arrive completely out of order.
They absolutely will.
The tires might get there before the engine. How does the receiving computer know what to do with a jumbled mess of data?
That is the magic of the protocol software on the receiving end. Remember that header we talked about?
The label that says, I am packet 45 of 100.
Yeah. The receiving computer collects all these packets, looks at their numbers, and holds them in its memory. If it has packet 44 and packet 46, but it's missing 45, it doesn't just crash.
What does it do?
It sends a tiny message back to the sender saying, hey, I never got piece 45, resend it.
Oh, wow.
And once it has all 100 pieces, it reassembles them in the correct mathematical order and presents the complete file to the user.
That is just stunning. It's so counterintuitive, You'd naturally think that keeping a message whole on a heavily guarded, secure path is the safest way to transmit it.
Right, that's what everyone thought.
But breaking it into a million microscopic pieces and throwing it to the wind is actually a more robust way to communicate.
And it wasn't just theoretical for very long. ARPA decided to put their money behind this.
They actually built it.
They officially started building an experimental resource sharing network based on packet switching. They called it the ARPANET.
Which brings us to a monumental date, October 29th, 1969.
The day the internet, in its absolute infancy, took its first breath.
The ARPANET development started incredibly small, didn't it? Just 2 network nodes.
Very small.
They interconnected a computer at UCLA, the University of California, Los Angeles, with a computer up the coast at the Stanford Research Institute.
Yep, 2 room-sized mainframes. And they used devices called interface message processors, or IMPs.
IMPs.
You can think of an IMP as the very first router. It was a smaller computer that sat next to the mainframe.
So the mainframe didn't do the routing.
No, the mainframe handed the whole message to the IMP, and the IMP's only job was to chop it into packets and fire them over a leased telephone line to the other IMP in Stanford, which would then reassemble them.
I read about this specific moment in the source, and it's actually incredibly funny. The very first message they tried to send on October 29, 1969, was just the word login.
Yes, a simple login command.
The team at UCLA typed the L and asked Stanford over a regular telephone if they got it. Stanford said yes.
So far, so good.
Then they typed the O. Stanford got it. They typed the G, and the entire system crashed.
The first internet crash, literally the very first message on the internet, was technically just low.
But they fixed the bug, and they got it working. Shortly after, they added a third site at the University of California, Santa Barbara, and a fourth at the University of Utah.
So they had 4 nodes.
Yeah, those 4 initial nodes, those 4 academic institutions in the American West, were basically the primordial soup of the digital age.
It really puts our current reality into perspective, doesn't it?
Definitely.
We have billions of smartphones, smart TVs, and refrigerators connected today. But in late 1969, the entire internet was just 4 computers talking to each other at a blistering speed of 50 kilobits per second.
But the idea worked. Packet switching was a reality, and the network grew rapidly.
It did. By the end of 1971, ARPANET had expanded to 15 sites, mostly military bases and academic research centers around Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Boston.
But as it grew through the early 1970s, they ran headfirst into a massive existential problem. ARPANET had proved that computers could talk to each other. But ARPANET wasn't the only network being built.
Right, because other countries and institutions saw this and started building their own.
Like France was building a network called Cyclades, right? And there was the Merit network in Michigan.
Exactly. But they were entirely separate islands of communication. Yeah, if you were on the ARPANET island, you could talk to anyone else on the ARPANET. But you couldn't send a message to a computer on the French de Whiteley's network.
Wait, why not? If they're all using wires, why couldn't they just plug them together?
Because they didn't speak the same digital language.
Oh, I see.
They used different packet sizes, different methods for routing, different speeds. It's like trying to plug an American appliance into a European wall outlet.
The physical infrastructure just doesn't match the standard.
Exactly. ARPANET was essentially a closed ecosystem. The real challenge of the 1970s, the hurdle that absolutely had to be cleared to create the modern internet, was figuring out how to connect these totally disparate, incompatible networks into one unified web.
They had to figure out how to build a network of networks.
Yes, the first steps were physical. In 1973, ARPANET made its first international connections. They linked up to NORSAR in Norway and to Peter Kirstein's research group at University College London in the UK.
So the physical transatlantic cables are finally in place.
But the physical connection is only half the battle. Just because you string a copper wire under the ocean between a computer in London and a computer in Los Angeles doesn't mean they can understand the electrical pulses they're sending each other.
So this is where we need a universal translator.
Precisely.
And this is where 2 absolute legends of computer science step onto the stage. Vint Cerf and Bob Kahn.
Vint Cerf was at Stanford University, and Bob Kahn was at DARPA, which is what ARPA was renamed to.
Right. Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency.
In 1974, they published a paper that fundamentally changed the trajectory of human history. It was called A Protocol for Packet Network Intercommunication.
Okay, we throw the word protocol around constantly in tech today, but what does it actually mean in the context of these mainframes?
Think of a protocol as an agreed-upon set of rules and etiquette for communication. It's a shared syntax.
Like grammar.
Exactly. If you and I don't agree on the rules of the English language, what a noun is, what a verb is, we can't communicate even if we're standing in the same room.
Makes sense.
Cerf and Kahn developed a protocol suite that we universally know today as TCP/IP.
TCP/IP,
Right.
Transmission Control Protocol and Internet Protocol.
Yes. The Internet Protocol, or IP, dictates how packets are addressed and routed. It's the envelope.
Okay.
And the Transmission Control Protocol, or TCP, dictates how the packets are chopped up, sequenced, and reassembled at the destination, ensuring no data is lost.
So they work together.
TCP/IP was the ultimate breakthrough because it allowed completely different hardware and operating systems across the world to interoperate seamlessly.
Okay, let's unpack this. I want to try another analogy here, leaning back on physical infrastructure.
Sure.
Let's look at global shipping before the 1950s. Ships would pull into port loaded with this chaotic mix of wooden crates, heavy barrels, canvas sacks, and loose lumber.
A total mess.
Right. The port workers had to figure out how to manually unload these weirdly shaped items and then somehow puzzle piece them onto completely different types of trains or flatbed trucks. It was a logistical nightmare that took weeks.
It was incredibly slow, and damage to the goods was practically guaranteed.
But then the global shipping industry adopted the standardized shipping container. You know, that corrugated steel box you see stacked on cargo ships and on the backs of trucks on the highway today?
Right.
The brilliant thing about the shipping container is that the crane operator in Singapore doesn't need to know what's inside the box. The truck driver in Germany doesn't care if it's carrying flat-screen TVs, frozen bananas, or car parts.
They just moved the box.
Exactly. The standardized size, the standardized locking mechanisms on the corners mean that anyone's crane, anyone's ship, and anyone's truck can seamlessly handle the cargo.
That's a great point.
Is TCP/IP essentially the shipping container standard for digital data?
That is a phenomenal way to visualize it.
Yeah.
Yes, TCP/IP doesn't care what the data payload actually is.
It could be anything.
It could be an email, a line of code, or an encrypted password. The protocol simply dictates the exact digital shape of the box.
Wow.
It defines how the digital box is sealed, how the address is formatted on the outside, and the mechanism for confirming it arrived. Because all these different networks, ARPANET, Cyclades, the UK networks, agreed to use this exact same standard box, data could suddenly flow seamlessly from a network in Paris to a network in California.
Across entirely different physical wires and routers.
Yep, it is the great digital equalizer.
And I found an incredible bit of trivia in the source material about the word internet itself, which ties directly into Vint Cerf and Bob Kahn's work in this era.
Oh, you're talking about RFC 675.
Yes. Vint Cerf and his graduate students were writing out this protocol specification in 1974, and they just started using the word internet as a quick shorthand for internet work.
Yeah, it wasn't some grand branding exercise. It was just a casual abbreviation.
But it stuck.
Though the source does point out that the word internet actually dates way back to 1849, meaning interconnected or interwoven. But Cerf and his team took that dusty old Victorian concept and applied it to computer networks.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, there is something about the development of TCP/IP that absolutely blows my mind.
What that?
The U.S. Department of Defense funded this research. They paid these brilliant scientists to crack the code for global digital communication. But they didn't lock it down.
They didn't patent it. They didn't make it a classified military secret.
Right. Why on earth wouldn't the military patent the most powerful communication tool ever invented?
Because the Department of Defense realized that to make the network truly survivable and ubiquitous, they needed the entire academic and commercial world to build it for them.
Oh, so it's strategic.
Highly strategic. If they kept it classified, it would only ever exist on a handful of military bases.
Yeah.
By making the protocols non-proprietary and completely open, they incentivized every university and eventually every telecommunications company to adopt it.
That decision to give it away for free is arguably the most important decision in the history of modern technology.
Without a doubt.
If TCP/IP had been patented by a corporation or locked behind a government firewall, the internet as we know it simply would not exist.
We would be living in an alternate reality of fractured corporate walled gardens. Imagine if you had to pay a subscription to AT&T to use their network protocol, but your friend used the IBM network protocol, so you just couldn't email each other.
That sounds terrible.
Because it was open, it catalyzed explosive organic growth.
The source mentions that by 1981, the National Science Foundation, the NSF, stepped in to fund the Computer Science Network, or CSNet, and then in 1986, they created the NSFNet.
The NSFNet was crucial because it provided a massive backbone. It connected supercomputer centers across the United States.
To handle the traffic.
Exactly. And we were talking about incredible speeds for the mid-1980s. They started at 56 kilobits per second, which is dial-up speed for those who remember it, and eventually upgraded to T1 lines running at 1.5 megabits per second.
Which feels glacially slow compared to a modern gigabit fiber connection, but was absolute warp speed back then.
It allowed for the transfer of massive data sets. And this NSFNet backbone expanded internationally, linking up with academic and research organizations in Europe, Australia, New Zealand, and Japan by the late 80s.
It's growing fast.
This was the moment the internet became a truly intercontinental functioning organism.
And by 1990, the original ARPANET, that military experiment with the 4 nodes out west, was officially decommissioned. Its job was done. It had birthed a global phenomenon.
The training wheels were off.
But I want to pause here and look at what the internet actually was in 1990.
Yeah.
The network was global, yes, but it was, for lack of a better term, incredibly ugly.
Oh, it was brutal to look at.
It was entirely text-based, it was highly technical, you had to memorize complex command line prompts just to retrieve a file.
Yeah, it wasn't user-friendly.
It was an incredibly robust infrastructure used by academics and scientists, but it was absolutely not something your average person was going to use to look up a recipe or read the morning news.
It lacked a user interface. It needed a visual layer that human beings could intuitively navigate without having a degree in computer science.
Which brings us to the early 1990s and a massive shift in the story. We leave the military labs of the US and we head to CERN.
The European Organization for Nuclear Research in Geneva, Switzerland.
CERN was, and still is, one of the most important scientific hubs on Earth. Thousands of physicists from all over the globe travel there to conduct experiments.
And in 1989, a British computer scientist named Tim Berners-Lee was working there as an independent contractor.
And Berners-Lee recognized a very specific, very frustrating problem at CERN.
Information chaos. You had all these brilliant researchers arriving at CERN, bringing their own computers, which ran completely different operating systems.
So Macs, PCs, UNIX machines.
Exactly. They had thousands of research papers, data sets, and manuals, but sharing them was a nightmare.
Even though they had the internet.
Right, the data was technically available on the internet, but finding it, logging into the specific server, and figuring out what format the document was in was immensely tedious.
So Berners-Lee writes a proposal. He lobbies CERN management for 2 years, basically saying, we need a unified system to manage all this information.
And by Christmas of 1990, working on a NeXT computer, which, by the way, was the computer company Steve Jobs founded after being ousted from Apple Berners-Lee, essentially gifts humanity the greatest Christmas present of the 20th century.
He wrote the code for the World Wide Web.
He did.
And it's astonishing what he accomplished in just a few months. He didn't just invent one thing, he had to invent an entire ecosystem of tools to make his idea work.
Let's break those down, because these acronyms literally run our lives today.
Let's do it.
First, he created HTTP, the Hypertext Transfer Protocol. This was the specific language computers would use to request and send these new documents.
The HTTP.
Then he created HPML, the Hypertext Markup Language.
HTML is the actual code used to visually structure a web page, right? The code that says, like, make this text bold or put a header here.
Exactly. It allowed documents to look uniform regardless of what kind of computer was reading them. He also created the first web browser called World Wide Web, and he set up the very first web server software to host the files.
Okay, I have to stop you here because we just hit on a massive common misconception. Our source material makes a very distinct separation between two terms that 99% of the population uses interchangeably every single day.
The Internet versus the World Wide Web.
Yes. If you ask someone on the street, they will say they are the exact same thing, but they are entirely different concepts.
It's a vital distinction. The Internet is the physical infrastructure. It is the copper wires buried in the ground, the fiber optic cables strung across the ocean floor, the massive arrays of routers, and the TCP/IP protocols we talked about that dictate how packets move.
So think of the internet as the physical train track spanning the globe.
Yes, the Internet is the train tracks, the physical pathways. The World Wide Web, on the other hand, is just one of many services that run on top of the Internet.
Oh, I see.
The web is the global collection of linked documents, images, and visual resources that you access using a software application called a browser. If the Internet is the steel tracks, the web is the passenger train running on those tracks.
That is so helpful because you can use the internet to do things that have nothing to do with the web, right?
Absolutely.
When I send an email using an app on my phone, or when I play a multiplayer video game on my console, or when my smartwatch syncs my heart rate to a server, those devices are using the internet, the tracks, to send data packets.
But they are not using the World Wide Web.
Exactly. The web is specifically those pages of visual information, usually starting with www, that are linked together.
Exactly. And that concept of linking pages together is the defining feature of Berners-Lee's invention. It's the hyperlink.
Here's where it gets really interesting for me. Try to imagine explaining a hyperlink to someone in 1985.
It would sound like magic.
Imagine you're reading a physical encyclopedia. You read an article about the Apollo moon landing, and it mentions the Saturn V rocket. If you want to know more about the Saturn V rocket, you have to put that book down, walk across the library, find the S volume, find the page, and start reading.
It's a manual physical process of information retrieval.
Right. But Berners-Lee introduced the hyperlink. You are reading a document on a computer screen. You see the words Saturn V rocket, and they are underlined and blue.
A familiar sight now.
Instead of going to a card catalog, you just use your mouse to click the word.
Mm.
And instantly, almost magically, you are teleported to a completely different document, perhaps hosted on a server physically located on the other side of the planet, entirely dedicated to that subject.
It was intellectual teleportation. By using URI's Uniform Resource Identifiers, which we now commonly call URLs, Berners-Lee created a global system of named references. He logically intertwined all of human knowledge into a single navigable web.
It is pure magic. And just like ARPA did with the TCP/IP protocols, CERN did something monumental with Berners-Lee's creation.
They gave it away.
They could have patented the web. They could have charged a licensing fee for every browser downloaded. But in April 1993, CERN released the source code for the World Wide Web into the public domain.
Completely free for anyone, anywhere to use and build upon.
That decision catalyzed an absolute explosion of innovation, didn't it?
Oh, massive. Because it was free, developers rushed to improve it. Later in 1993, a team at the University of Illinois released Mosaic.
Mosaic was a web browser, right? Why is it so important?
Mosaic was a game changer because it was the first widely adopted browser to display images in line with the text.
What does that mean, in line?
Well, in the very early browsers, if there was an image, you had to click a link and it would open in a separate clunky window.
Yeah.
Mosaic allowed the text to wrap around the image.
Oh, like a magazine.
Exactly. Suddenly, a web page didn't look like a computer terminal anymore. It looked like a page from a glossy magazine. It was visually appealing to non-technical people.
And as millions of new pages were created, people needed a way to find things. The source notes that the very first search engine, called Archie, was launched back in 1990 by a student in Montreal.
Yeah, Archie.
Though, from what I understand, Archie wasn't searching web pages the way Google does today, was it?
No, Archie predated the massive explosion of the web. It was primarily indexing FTP sites, file transfer protocol sites.
Just looking for files.
Right. It would search through directories of files hidden across different servers so you could locate a specific piece of software or data. But it laid the conceptual groundwork for the search engines that would soon follow.
So the pieces are falling into place. The interface is visual with Mosaic. The navigation is intuitive with hyperlinks. And the software is free.
It's a perfect storm.
Giving the public the World Wide Web was like handing every citizen the keys to a free Ferrari. But there was a massive looming disaster that we were about to slam into at full speed.
The physical infrastructure.
Yes, the web was a Ferrari, but the physical internet, the actual wires buried in the ground, was still a dirt road.
It wasn't ready.
It was built to handle text files and scientific data. It was absolutely not built to handle millions of consumers suddenly logging on to download full-color images, music files, and eventually video.
I would have collapsed.
To survive the mainstream explosion, the physical hardware needed an unprecedented upgrade.
Which transitions our story into the mid to late 1990s. We enter the hardware boom, characterized by lasers, fiber optics, and full-blown commercialization.
The dam officially broke in 1995. That was the year the NSFNet backbone was completely decommissioned.
A huge milestone.
It really is, because it removed the very final government restrictions on commercial traffic. The internet was no longer a taxpayer-funded government and academic playground. It was handed over to commercial internet service providers.
And businesses didn't just walk through that open door, they sprinted.
They saw the money.
Exactly. The horse points out that early commercialization had been bubbling up just prior to this. Companies like MCI Mail and CompuServe had established gateways to the internet as early as 1989. But post-1995, it exploded.
Like online banking, right?
Yes. The Stanford Federal Credit Union became the first financial institution to offer online banking to all its members in October 1994. Over in Europe, the OP Financial Group followed in 1996.
The era of e-commerce had officially begun. But as millions of people logged on, the network started to choke. We hit what engineers called the bandwidth crisis.
The growth metrics from this era are terrifying if you are an infrastructure engineer. During the late 1990s, traffic on the public internet was growing by 100% per year.
It was doubling annually.
Doubling annually. The physical copper wires and the early primitive fiber optic cables simply could not carry that much data that fast. The pipes were literally too small.
And I imagine you can't just easily dig up every street in America, Europe, and Asia to lay down millions of new cables.
No. The environmental reviews, the manual labor, the raw materials, it would cost trillions of dollars and take decades.
So how did they solve a physical bottleneck of that magnitude without digging up the earth?
They solved it with light. Specifically, they solved it through the innovations of a telecommunications equipment company founded in 1992 called Ciena Corporation.
Okay.
The co-founders, David Huber and Kevin Kimberlin, alongside their CEO Pat Nettles, realized the only way to scale the internet was to drastically increase the capacity of the optical fibers that were already in the ground.
They leaned heavily into lasers.
Yes. Fiber optic technology, which transmits data via pulses of laser light down thin strands of glass, was originally developed by pioneers like Gordon Gould, who invented the laser.
Right.
Ciena took this foundational concept and pushed it to its absolute physical limits using something called an optical amplifier.
Okay, I'm a bit lost. I understand that a laser flashes on and off to represent digital ones and zeros, but how do you push that to the limit?
It's pretty amazing.
The source says after years of trial and error, Ciena invents something called DWDM, dense wave division multiplexing. They filed the patent for this in 1995. What does that actually mean?
DWDM is arguably one of the most profound pieces of electrical engineering in the late 20th century. Prior to DWDM, a single strand of fiber optic cable could only carry data using a single wavelength or single color of laser light.
It's like having a water pipe that can only push one stream of water.
Exactly. So if a telecommunications company like Sprint had laid a single-lane fiber optic highway between New York and Chicago, that pipe was maxed out.
They couldn't push any more light through it.
Right. To get more data across, they thought they would have to dig a trench and lay 15 more cables next to it.
Which we already established is too expensive.
But Ciena realized something fundamental about light. Different colors of light do not interfere with each other when they travel through the same space.
Like a prism.
Think of a prism that splits white light into a rainbow. Ciena's DWDM technology basically did that in reverse. It allowed Sprint to take 16 different colored lasers, attach a different data stream to each color, and shoot all 16 colors down the exact same existing glass tube simultaneously.
Wait, and they don't blend together into white light?
No, because they are on slightly different, tightly controlled frequencies, different wavelengths. When the light reaches the other end in Chicago, a receiver splits the colors back apart and reads all 16 data streams independently.
That is mind-blowing.
Ciena instantly turned Sprint's single-lane highway into a 16-lane superhighway, multiplying the bandwidth by 16 without turning a single shovel of dirt.
That is genius. And Sprint recognized the value immediately, didn't they?
They threw money at it.
In 1996, they paid nearly $200 million for that 16-channel system. I love the quote from Kevin Kimberlin in the source material. He called the deployment of that DWDM system the real dawn of the internet.
He's not wrong.
Because without it, the surge of users in the late 90s would have ground the entire network to a complete halt. Videos would buffer forever, pages wouldn't load, and the commercial internet would have died in its infancy.
It provided the massive scaling required by commercialization. And this physical growth in telecommunications capacity actually followed a predictable trajectory, very similar to Moore's law for computer processing chips.
The source refers to Edholm's law. I haven't heard of that one.
Named after Phil Edholm, it observed that telecommunications bandwidth, the speed at which we can transmit data, was doubling every 18 months.
That's a rapid pace.
And this exponential growth was catalyzed precisely by these advances in laser lightwave systems and MOS technology, which are the metal oxide semiconductor chips that drive the routing hardware.
So to recap where we are, the commercial gates are wide open, the public is armed with visually intuitive web browsers like Mosaic, and the fiber optic superhighways have been blasted wide open by Ciena's lasers.
Everything is in place.
The internet was perfectly primed to escape the beige, clunky desktop computer and completely take over the globe.
Which brings us firmly into the 21st century, the mobile era, and the modern web.
Let's talk about the sheer velocity of human adoption here, because the demographic numbers provided in the source are staggering.
They really are.
In 2005, which really wasn't that long ago, only 16% of the global population was online. Just 16%.
It was still primarily a luxury of the developed Western world. But the acceleration was brutal. By 2010, that number had nearly doubled to 30%.
And it kept climbing.
And by 2023, it reached 67% of the global population, over 5 billion people.
And as it grew, The demographics of who is actually online completely shifted. We have this deep-seated cultural bias that the internet is a very Western, Silicon Valley-centric invention,
Sure.
but the center of gravity has aggressively moved east.
Dramatically so. The source data shows that by 2018, Asia accounted for 51% of all internet users worldwide.
More than half.
At that time, China hit 802 million users. India followed with 700 million users. The United States was a distant third with only 275 million users.
More than half the internet is in Asia. Why did they leapfrog the West so quickly in adoption during that specific decade?
It comes down to infrastructure legacy.
Legacy.
In the US and Europe, we'd spent a century burying copper telephone wires. So our transition to the internet was tethered to those wires, dial-up, then DSL, then early cable modems.
Right.
But many developing nations in Asia didn't have that legacy copper infrastructure spread across rural areas. So they didn't bother laying it. They leapfrogged straight to wireless cellular technology.
Right. Why dig a trench for a wire when you can just build a cell tower that covers a 20-mile radius?
Exactly. The smartphone became the primary and often the only computer for billions of people. This led to a massive milestone in internet history in October 2016.
October 2016. That was the moment when mobile and tablet internet usage finally exceeded desktop usage worldwide.
A huge shift in behavior.
The majority of internet traffic was no longer coming from people sitting at a desk in an office. It was coming from people on trains, in cafes, and walking down the street. The internet became an invisible, persistent layer of information superimposed over the physical world, constantly pulsing in our pockets.
But this explosive mobile growth, billions of smartphones suddenly logging onto the network, created yet another massive infrastructure headache.
We ran into another wall.
Yeah. We had solved the physical bandwidth problem with lasers. But now we ran out of numerical space. We literally ran out of IP addresses.
I remember hearing about this in the news, but I never really understood how you can run out of numbers.
It sounds strange.
Every device connected to the internet needs an IP address, right? It's like a digital mailing address so the packets know where to go.
Exactly. And this raises an important question about foresight and technology. Back in 1981, when Vint Cerf and the early pioneers designed IPv4 Internet Protocol version 4, they used a 32-bit number system for the addresses.
Okay, 32-bit math. What does that translate to in human numbers?
2 to the power of 32 gives you roughly 4.3 billion unique combinations, which means IPv4 could support 4.3 billion unique addresses.
That sounds like a lot.
Now think about 1981. A computer still cost tens of thousands of dollars and weighed 50 pounds. The idea that there would ever be 4.3 billion computers on Earth must have seemed like an infinite, impossible number to reach.
They couldn't possibly imagine a future where not only does every single human on Earth have a powerful computer in their pocket, but their wristwatch, their television, their thermostat, and their refrigerator all demand their own unique IP address to connect to the network.
It was unimaginable. So as the smartphone boom hit, the inevitable happened. In 2011, the top-level global pool of unallocated IPv4 addresses was officially exhausted.
The internet essentially put up a no-vacancy sign.
Pretty much.
So what did we do? Did the internet just stop accepting new devices?
Thankfully, network engineers saw this cliff approaching in the mid-1990s. They spent years developing the successor, IPv6.
And they fixed it.
And they didn't just slightly increase the capacity, they went for absolute overkill.
Yeah.
IPv6 uses 128-bit addresses.
Okay, 2 to the power of 128. I can't even begin to calculate that. How big is that number?
It is astronomically large. While IPv4 gave us 4.3 billion addresses, IPv6 gives us 340 undecillion addresses.
340 undecillion.
To put that in a tangible perspective, IPv6 provides enough unique IP addresses to assign one to every single atom on the surface of the Earth, and you would still have plenty of addresses left over.
Okay, that is truly brain-melting, every atom on Earth.
Yep.
So the infrastructure adapts. We upgrade from copper to lasers. We upgrade from IPv4 to IPv6. The protocols evolve. But as we talk about this massive planetary scale machine, a very basic human question comes to mind.
What's that?
Who is actually in charge of all this? We have nearly 5.5 billion people logging on, routing traffic across sovereign borders, conducting trillions of dollars in commerce. Who is the boss of the internet?
That is perhaps the most beautiful, perplexing paradox of the entire system. No one is the boss. The internet operates without a single central governing body.
So what does this all mean? How does this system, this critical, not just collapse into geopolitical anarchy? If the U.S. and China are in a trade war, why doesn't the internet between them just sever?
Because the internet relies on a fragile, but resilient web of voluntary cooperation, peering agreements between private network providers, and nonprofit consortiums.
So they just agree to work together.
The foundational mechanics are governed by consensus. For instance, you have ICANN, the Internet Corporation, for assigned names and numbers.
What exactly do they do?
They direct the overarching allocation of the IP address spaces we just talked about, and they manage the domain name system, the DNS.
The DNS.
The DNS is the phone book of the Internet. It translates a human-readable name, like wikipedia.org, into the numerical IP address that the computers actually need to route the packets.
Ah, so you don't have to memorize numbers.
Right. ICANN manages that master list to ensure that when you type a URL, you go to the right place globally.
And what about the actual technical rules? Who decides how the next version of a protocol should work?
That falls to the IETF, the Internet Engineering Task Force.
Hmm.
And their structure is incredibly egalitarian.
Mm-hmm.
It's a nonprofit organization made up of loosely affiliated international participants, network engineers, academics, and corporate researchers from all over the world. Anyone can associate with them by contributing technical expertise.
So if I'm an engineer in Brazil, I can just propose a better way to route traffic.
Yes. You submit a technical document called a Request for Comments, or RFC. If the global community of engineers reviews your RFC, debates it, and agrees that it's a solid improvement, it becomes an adopted standard.
It is a modern miracle of human collaboration. It's a system spanning billions of people, completely underpinning the global economy, and it's run by nonprofit task forces publishing requests for comments rather than being dictated by a single corporate king or a United Nations mandate.
However, this decentralized nature raises an important question about the current and future state of the Internet, specifically regarding digital divides and the fragmentation of access.
It's not perfectly equal.
No. While the technology is theoretically open, the economic reality is not. The source points out that while 93% of the developed world was online by 2023, the developing world was lagging at around 60%.
Still a big gap.
And more importantly, how those users access the Internet can be vastly different.
What do you mean? An internet connection is an internet connection, isn't it?
Not necessarily. The source details a controversial practice called zero rating, which is prevalent in many developing nations.
Zero rating? What is that?
In these markets, Internet service providers or massive tech companies will offer users cellular plans with free access to the Internet. But there is a massive catch.
There's always a catch.
The access is only free for specific pre-selected applications,
Yeah.
usually their own social media platforms or their own messaging apps.
Oh, I see. So if I use the sponsored social media app, it doesn't count against my monthly data cap. But if I try to open a web browser and search an independent news site, I get charged data fees that I might not be able to afford.
Precisely. It creates a severely fractured experience. For millions of the poorest users on Earth, the Internet isn't the open, wild west of limitless information that Tim Berners-Lee envisioned.
It's limited.
It is a highly curated, walled garden controlled by a single corporation. It inherently limits open access to the broader web and distorts their view of what the Internet actually is.
That is a profound challenge for the next decade. How do we ensure that the open protocols of the 1970s aren't smothered by the economic monopolies of the 2020s?
It's the big question right now.
Well, we have covered an astonishing amount of ground today. We traced the optimistic dream of J.C.R. Licklider's universal network. We unpacked how Paul Barron designed packet switching to survive the paranoia of the Cold War.
We looked at how Vint Cerf and Bob Kahn gave disparate networks a common language with the TCP/IP shipping containers.
And we saw how Tim Berners-Lee built the visual, hyperlinked web at CERN to manage scientific chaos, how Sienna Corporation shot multiple colors of laser light down glass tubes to save us from the bandwidth crisis, all the way to the smartphone mobile revolution that put this immense planetary power directly into our pockets.
It is a testament to iterative human ingenuity. Layer upon layer upon layer of problem solving, building an invisible infrastructure that has fundamentally altered the evolutionary trajectory of our species.
Before we sign off, looking at all this history, what is the one big takeaway, the one thought you want to leave our listener with today?
I want to focus on a demographic estimate from the International Telecommunication Union that was mentioned toward the end of our source material.
Okay.
They estimated that as of 2025, there are roughly 6 billion people online. That is a staggering logistical achievement. But if you look at the global population, it leaves approximately 2.2 billion people who are still completely offline.
Over 2 billion human minds entirely disconnected from this global nervous system.
Exactly. My final thought to ponder is this. What happens to human knowledge, to global economics, and to the culture of the internet itself when those final 2.2 billion minds log on for the very first time?
That's a huge influx of people.
The next chapter of the internet's history isn't going to be written by military labs in the US or by Silicon Valley billionaires or by physicists at CERN. It is going to be written by that next massive wave of users in developing nations, bringing their languages, their unique cultural perspectives, and their unseen innovations to the network.
Wow.
The network is going to evolve again, and we don't know what that looks like yet.
That is a phenomenal point. The history of the internet is far from finished. So, to you listening, the next time you pull your phone out of your pocket to stream a movie or send a text message or tap a blue hyperlink, take just 1 second to appreciate the sheer scale of the invisible global plumbing that makes that simple action possible.
It's worth thinking about.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the everyday miracles around you and keep learning.